Have you ever looked at your Banff trip plan and thought, okay, I have Lake Louise, Moraine Lake, the Icefields Parkway, maybe Jasper, maybe Yoho, maybe Kananaskis, the gondola, maybe rafting, maybe a hike. But how on earth do I turn all of this into an actual script? That is exactly the feeling that came through in so many of the questions you sent me for the podcast giveaway. You're not asking, what should I do in Banff? You're asking, what should I prioritize when I can't do everything? You're asking, what's worth booking ahead? You're asking, what if I'm traveling with people who don't all hike? You're also asking, is Jasper still worth it? And where do I go when I need a break from the crowds? These are the real questions that I get as a Banff travel planner. Once you move past the beautiful photos and the endless list of things to do, the real challenge is building a trip that actually works. Welcome to the Banff Travel Podcast. I'm Celine Brewer, and I live here in Canmore, just minutes from Banff National Park. My goal is to help you plan an unforgettable trip to Banff and the Canadian Rockies without the overwhelm and all of that second guessing. Now, today's episode is a little different. I recently asked you for your questions and feedback as part of a podcast giveaway celebrating 1 year of the Banff Travel Podcast. And I received so many incredible submissions. So first, thank you. I read every single one, and so many of your messages honestly made my week. You told me the podcast has helped you understand the shuttle system, plan around Jasper, figure out what to pack, choose hikes, and just generally feel less overwhelmed. Some of you said you listen while driving, while walking, and even together with your spouse. That is exactly why I keep showing up. So today I'm going to answer as many of those questions as I can by grouping them into big themes that came up again and again. We'll talk about prioritizing Lake Louise and Moraine Lake, Jasper, crowds, weather, food, families, mixed hiking abilities, and those experiences that can make a trip feel extra memorable. And at the end, I'll announce the 3 giveaway winners. Let's start with the biggest theme that came through, prioritizing. Questions like, what are the must-dos? Am I spending too much time in Banff? If you could only do 3 big things, what would you do and why? You were finding it difficult trying to decide what to prioritize in Jasper and on the Icefields Parkway, and how to divide the time between Banff, Jasper, Yoho, Kootenay, and Kananaskis. I think it's become pretty obvious. It's not hard to find things to do around here. It's hard to edit a trip down to what you can reasonably do in the time that you're here. I was on a travel consultation yesterday with a family going through the different areas like Canmore, Kananaskis, Banff, Lake Louise, Icefields Parkway, and Jasper. And it really comes down to what fits you, how you travel, your group, and what you want from your trip. So it's really hard for me to tell you what the 3 big things are, because what I would choose to do can be very different than what you choose to do. I might pick 3 very long hikes for those 3 days, whereas you might want scenic drives and easy viewpoints. Now, you can fill 10 days here without even trying, right? Lake Louise, Moraine Lake, Johnson Canyon, the Banff Gondola, Lake Minnewanka, 2 Jack Lake, Vermilion, the list goes on, right? You've heard me say it so many times. We have rafting, biking, canoeing, wildlife viewing, photography, hot springs, restaurants, and hikes of every level. That list keeps growing. So instead of asking, how do I fit in as much time as possible, ask yourself what would make this trip feel complete for you. Now, for first-time visitors, I would build the trip around 3 big experiences. So back to that, if you had 3 big things, what would you do and why? First, a Lake Louise and Moraine Lake day. That might be a sightseeing day or might be a hiking day, but either way, you're visiting those iconic lakes. If you hike, it's the perfect place to do a really long hike. Second, the Icefields Parkway day. Even if you don't drive all the way to Jasper, this is one of the most spectacular drives in the Canadian Rockies. You have Bow Lake, Peyto Lake, Messiah Canyon, the Columbia Icefield area, those big mountain views that are just going to feel different than, say, the Banff town site. Speaking of the Banff town site, I think that's an excellent third option. The Banff town site and the nearby lakes, and making a day out of it. This is where you can do Banff Gondola, you can see Bow Falls, you can go to Lake Minnewanka, do a boat cruise, you can see 2 Jack Lake, Cascade Ponds has some spectacular views, Vermilion Lakes, the list goes on. Now, if you have more time, then I would definitely start adding on Yoho National Park, Kananaskis, Kootenay, some longer hikes, maybe doing some biking, some rafting, or even some quieter and more unique experiences. And if you're wondering how are you going to organize all of this, if you head to episode 13 on how to create your Banff itinerary, it's a great one to go back and listen to. It walks through the idea of building your trip by zones, which is one of the easiest ways to avoid wasting time and driving back and forth. My biggest piece of advice is don't judge the success of your trip by how many things you checked off or how many of those Instagram pictures you got. I live here and I still haven't done everything. So please don't expect yourself to see it all in one visit. And if you're the type of person who really doesn't want to be around crowds, don't feel bad about skipping some of those main sites. It's your trip. You should enjoy the mountains in your own way. Now, obviously, the Lake Louise and Moraine Lake questions come up a lot. They come up here, they come up in the Facebook group, they come up on Instagram. This does not surprise me at all. Several of you mentioned that the shuttle system finally made some sense after listening to the podcast and attending my workshops, which is so great to hear. And it lets me know that I did my job. Now, other popular topics were how to make the most of a day when you're maybe using the Parks Canada shuttle between Lake Louise and Moraine Lake, and how to incorporate hiking into that too. So let's talk about this. If you're using the Parks Canada shuttle, the big advantage is flexibility. Once you have your reservation, you can use the lake connector between Lake Louise and Moraine Lake. So that gives you a lot of freedom than, maybe some of the other shuttles that have more fixed times at the lake. But the key is this, you're not going to plan your day around the shuttle first. You want to plan it around what you want to do at the lakes and choosing the shuttle that's the best fit for that. Now, we've already said Parks Canada Ultimate Flexibility is a good choice. If your goal is sightseeing, you can do both of those lakes in one day. That works really well. If you're just going to see the lakes, you can spend time at Lake Louise, you can walk part or all of the lakeshore, you can take photos, then you can use the lake connector to visit Moraine Lake. At Moraine Lake, you can do the rock pile, that iconic view, then walk along the lakeshore and give yourself some time to actually sit there and enjoy it for a few minutes. If your goal is hiking, that does change the day. So at Lake Louise, hiking to the Lake Agnes Tea House is one of the most popular hikes there. The Plain of Six Glaciers Tea House is longer and more of a commitment, but it's also less busy. At Moraine Lake, Constellation Lakes is a short, easy hike. It's a good option if you want something a little less intense. And then if you want something more difficult, Larch Valley and up to Sentinel Pass is absolutely beautiful. So I've talked about doing Lake Louise first, but you can obviously do them in the reverse order. For example, if you want to hike Larch Valley, especially during larch season, you might want more time at Moraine Lake to do that hike without constantly watching the clock. So during peak summer seasons, we see a lot of the shuttles focusing on hiking at Lake Louise. And that's because those popular hikes are the Lake Agnes Tea House or the Plain of Six Glaciers Tea House. But in September, when we get into larch season, there are some shuttles that will adjust to be more specific to larch hiking. And one of the best larch hikes is Larch Valley at Moraine Lake. Now, of course, Rome Transit and Parks Canada shuttles work for those too. If you want a little bit more information on how much time you need at Lake Louise and Moraine Lake, go back to episode 10 where I went through all of this. And episode 56 is great if you didn't get the Parks Canada shuttle that you want and you're wondering where to go next. Obviously, with all the talk about Lake Louise and Moraine Lake, another question that comes up is, can you take shuttles to other sites? While you can book a tour to other places like Yoho National Park or up the Icefields Parkway, there's actually no other Parks Canada shuttles or public shuttles to those places. Now, that being said, the Rome Transit public bus system does go to many other places. It goes to the Banff Gondola, Johnston Canyon, Lake Minnewanka, and even to Canmore. Now, some of those are summer routes only, and you can't make reservations on those Rome routes like you can for Route 8X to Lake Louise. They just don't work the same way, but they do work like a bus where you just get your ticket and get in line. Now, also keep in mind that many trailheads, scenic drives, and quieter areas are easier if you have your own vehicle or you join a tour. So my advice is to think of those shuttles as part of your transportation plan and not necessarily all of your plan. If you are doing a car-free trip, you absolutely can still have a great Banff trip. But you need to build your itinerary around places where Rome Transit serves it well, or that you can easily do tours that are within your budget. Now, episode 9 goes into whether or not you need a car in Banff, and that's one I would listen to. Another very popular topic that came through was Jasper. Many of you are still wondering if it's worth visiting after the wildfires in 2024. Now, this year, 2026, the Cavell Road and Moraine Canyon are going to stay closed as far as I know. I haven't seen any updates on when they will open. However, I have seen that the Valley of the Five Lakes hike will be reopening this year. So you'll want to check current Parks Canada updates closer to your trip and before you finalize your Jasper days. That said, Jasper is still beautiful. Moraine Lake is still worth doing, especially if you're doing the boat cruise or a hike there or even just driving the road out there. Even without Moraine Canyon, it's such a beautiful spot and it's great for spotting wildlife. Some of the other things I love to do in the Jasper area is the hike up to Whistler Summit from the Jasper Skytram. It's incredible views. Or even the Old Fort Point hike just outside of town. You know, you get views over the river, you walk through some of the burnt forest. It's still well worth it. Of course, Pyramid Lake, Patricia Lake are also great, easier options for views, short walks, paddling, and, just a wonderful Jasper experience. There are just so many great options. So yes, Jasper absolutely is worth doing and having on your itinerary if it fits. And remember, if you're driving from Banff to Jasper, the Icefields Parkway has so many wonderful stops. It's one of the highlights. You have Bow Lake, Peyto Lake, Waterfowl Lakes, Mistaya Canyon, the Columbia Icefields, Sunwapta Falls, Athabasca Falls. You can easily film more than a day, especially if you add on some really great hikes. If you want to know a little bit more about fitting Jasper into your trip, listen to episode 41 or episode 23 is a great one on the Icefields Parkway. Now, this question I really like. It was, what do I do in July when I just need a break from the crowds? This is such a good question because July is busy. There's just no way around it. But busy doesn't mean your trip is going to be ruined. It's just thinking more about what to do on your trip and setting those expectations that it isn't going to be quiet. Now, I remember hearing a stat last year that 90% of people who visit Banff never leave pavement. That's insane. But what that tells me is that you don't have to go very far to escape the crowds. I also find that doing activities, if you're able to, like cycling, hiking, even canyoning, raft tours, or even whitewater rafting, they give you that sense of being in the mountains, but without so many people around. And then between Kananaskis, Canmore, less famous Banff Lakes, nearby Yoho and Kootenay, there's no shortage of hikes that you can go on or even easier walks. Now, I know that some of those adventurous activities I mentioned or some of these hikes aren't for everyone. Not everyone is capable of doing those, and that's okay. Another strategy is just the time of day. Sometimes you don't need to get too far away or find a secret place. You just need to visit a popular place at a better time of day. Places like Vermilion Lakes, Tujack Lake, Cascade Ponds, Lake Minnewanka, they can feel completely different early in the morning or later in the evening than midday. So we recently got back from Italy, as some of you know, and we spent 2 days at the end of our trip in Rome, and it felt so busy to me. Now, I've talked to a few other people who agreed that it's just that busy. And, this wasn't my first time in Rome. We were there maybe 8 years ago, and yes, I understand that everywhere is much busier these days. But I was also reminded that at the time, 8 years ago when I went, I was traveling with 2 toddlers. So we were out early in the mornings before everyone else. My kids are early risers. They always have been. And, I think that made such a difference in how it felt. We were also there longer, so we spread everything out. And this time, we had 2 days and tried to cram things in to show our kids as much as we could, because of course they didn't remember the things from when they were toddlers. But so that was a really good reminder on just like the time of day that you get out and planning things and maybe, spreading them out longer if you have the time. But, it was also a good reminder that even us people who plan travel for a living, make mistakes. Okay, now obviously I get a lot of questions about weather, what to expect, how to plan around it, what to do if it's bad or it's smoky. Because yes, wildfires are a real possibility, and we can even get smoke blown in from somewhere else. Now, this is one of the hardest parts of planning a mountain trip because you can do everything right and still get weather that doesn't cooperate. So, the best thing you can do is take it for what it is, build some flexibility into your itinerary. For especially rainy days, you can do things like the Cave and Basin, museums, scenic drives, your hotel hot tub, or even, the Banff hot springs. You can do short little stops, spend some time in a coffee shop or a restaurant with a view. Maybe you even do your souvenir shopping in Banff or Canmore. Or maybe doing a hike that's a little less dependent on views, like a canyon hike, like Johnson Canyon. Plus, it's going to be less busy. Now, for smoke, which is a very real possibility, it really depends on the conditions. Some days it may just make the views hazy. Other days you may need to adjust your plans more significantly, especially if anyone in your group is sensitive to the air quality. But know also that can change quickly as the wind shifts direction. So it's just really hard to predict. And I understand how devastating that can be to come and then not be able to get those views that you were hoping for. As for indoor activities, if you do need more suggestions there, episode 17 is all about what to do in Banff when it rains or if you're looking for more indoor activities. Now that we're end of April, early May, we're now in the time of year where everyone is starting to get concerned about what to book ahead. My advice on this one is always to book ahead for anything that would really disappoint you if you missed it, especially if you have a specific time of day that you want to do it. You can wait, but there is always the possibility that it might sell out, or even if you're trying to wait for good weather, that day ends up not being great anyways. I always say if you know you want to do something like the Banff Gondola, the Moraine Lake boat cruise, the ice explorers on the Columbia Icefield, any of those types of things where in peak season have a chance of selling out, it's worth just getting them booked. Even activities like whitewater rafting, obviously your shuttles. And then when it gets closer to your day, if the weather looks absolutely horrendous, you can always try to change it or make the best of it. As for restaurants, if you're a group, yes, absolutely, you're going to want to make those dinner reservations, especially in Banff, Lake Louise, and Jasper in peak season. Canmore as well. In fact, I'd still book ahead for popular places or if you had a specific time or place that you wanted to eat. And yes, so many comments. I hear you guys on the restaurants. This came up several times in the feedback about giving more advice on where to eat, coffee shops, restaurants, and all of that. So I'm thinking about how to do a podcast on that or how to incorporate that information about restaurants. We do have some posts on our site, Travel Banff Canada, on restaurants in Canmore that we really enjoy. It can be difficult because the restaurants are always changing and keeping up to date with that can be difficult, but that is a good place to start, and I will try to incorporate that a little bit more into the podcast. The next group of questions was more specific to experiences. I got asked about the differences between the Banff Upper Hot Springs and the Basin Glacial Waters, Kananaskis Nordic Spa, and the other spa experiences. One question was also about unique experiences for an anniversary trip. Others were about more adventurous experiences like whitewater rafting, canoeing, caving, and finally about guided activities versus doing things on your own. So let's talk about experiences. First of all, Banff Upper Hot Springs, classic, easy, more affordable soak. But you want to think big, hot pool. It's not a luxury spa experience like what you're going to get at the Fairmont Chateau Lake Louise or like the Nordic Spa in Kananaskis or the new Everwild in Canmore. So it really depends on what you're looking for. Now, for a unique anniversary experience, that might be something like dinner at the Sky Bistro at the top of the Banff Gondola or afternoon tea at the Fairmont Chateau Lake Louise. It might be a private photography session, maybe a helicopter tour over the Rockies, maybe a spa day, a quiet canoe outing, or even something more adventurous like the Via Ferrata. Think something memorable, especially for those big anniversaries. Now, for guided versus doing it yourself, you need to ask yourself 2 questions. Does the guide make the experience safer or more interesting? And does the guide make the logistics easier? Now, for things like caving and rafting in Via Ferrata and wildlife tours, obviously, you need a guide for those. They have to be guided tours. But for things like biking the Bow Valley Parkway or, some of your sightseeing days, you do need to think about, does it make sense? Can I do this on my own? Am I comfortable doing this on my own? Or would I rather somebody else take me? It really depends on you and how much you enjoy a guided experience. Now, for example, if we're just talking about hikes, some hikes are incredible guided experiences, especially if you're doing something like the Burgess Shale. But for some, I would definitely prefer to just enjoy them on my own, at my own time, at my own pace. Perhaps for something like the Icefields Parkway, you would enjoy a tour more, somebody to explain things more, a shuttle that can drop you off instead of you looking for parking. So there are definitely some times when it makes sense, and it's really going to depend on you and the type of travel that you like. Now, I also got asked about planning for a family where some people want to hike and others can't. Someone also mentioned trip plans can feel too hike heavy for people who are not hikers. Then there's getting a group to get aligned and committed to a plan, and then finally what to do with little kids. And I even got asked about, those boring but important parts of the trip like laundry. So again, very real, very common questions. When you're planning for a group with mixed ages, mixed fitness levels, or young kids, the goal is not to create, that one perfect day that everybody does to get everything together every minute. Lake Louise is a good example. Some people could do the lakeshore there. Others could hike to Lake Agnes. Stronger hikers could continue further. So that's a good option where everybody goes to the same place at the same time, but gets a version of the day that works for them. Moraine Lake can work the same way. Some people could do the rock pile and the lakeshore and canoe, while some others could maybe do a longer hike. Obviously, if people are doing longer hikes, you want them to be somewhat quick hikers so everybody else isn't waiting for them for so long. Now, the Banff Gondola is another really good mixed ability option because it gives everyone a big mountain experience without requiring a big hike. Lake Minnewanka area is also great because you can do viewpoints, short walks, boat cruise options, picnics, or just enjoy the scenery. So some of those areas that have multiple things that you can do in the same area are great to do together, and then you can always have days where you split up. For young kids, I would definitely prioritize, variety over how far you hike. So think, throwing rocks into the water, playing in the water, playground time, short walks, easy hikes, places like Cascade Ponds, Johnson Lake, Bow Falls, Two Jack Lake, Lake Minnewanka, lots of easy Canmore walks. All those can be great with younger kids. I do have an episode on Banff with kids in the works, so stay tuned for that one. Now, for group planning, you don't necessarily want to ask everyone, what do you want to do? Because that just opens the door to chaos, right? Instead, I would give 2 or 3 realistic options that everybody can choose from. Would you rather have a big lake day, a scenic drive day, or a hiking day? It's much easier for people to choose from a short list than trying to build that trip with all of the options. And if you're traveling with people who don't hike, episode 53, Banff for non-hikers, is one I definitely listen to, as well as episode 49 for multi-generational trips. Now, for the practical side of trip planning, Canmore and Banff both have grocery stores. Canmore is often easier for those types of errands because it has several stores all together, like grocery stores, sports stores. You can park in one spot and hit them all. For laundry, Canmore, Banff, Jasper, they all have self-serve laundromats like Canmore Sunshine Laundromat, Cascade Coin in Banff, or Three Sheets in Jasper. I definitely remember having to take a full morning to deal with our laundry when we were in Iceland. So it's just one of those things that needs to get done on a longer trip, especially when you're staying in an RV. Another question I've seen come up lately, and that was also asked in the Facebook group, was about food and bears and leaving food in your car or carrying it with you on hikes. So, yes, you should be thoughtful about food on trails, but you don't need to be scared to bring your snacks. Bring your food, bring your water, bring enough layers. As for food, just never leave it unattended. Don't feed the wildlife, even those cute chipmunks that come right to you or those gray jays that will swoop down at your food. It's bad for the animals. Also, don't leave snacks sitting out in a picnic area. Don't let kids wander around dropping food everywhere. And yes, you can also safely leave food in your car. As for bears, you've heard me say it before, carry bear spray, know how to use it, and make noise on the trail, especially around those blind corners or in areas with limited visibility. And of course, continue to educate yourself on traveling in bear country. I also got asked about the best lakes or locations besides Lake Louise and Moraine Lake for sunrise and sunset. And I do love this question because there's so many beautiful options that don't require the same complicated shuttles. Vermilion Lakes is one of the easiest and most classic Banff options. It can be beautiful at both sunrise and sunset. Two Jack Lake is another great one, especially if you want reflections and mountain views. Lake Minnewanka as well, especially when the light hits the mountains and the water. Bow Lake, Peyto Lake can both be incredible if you're already on the Icefields Parkway. And if you're staying in Canmore, the mountain views, even from town, can be beautiful in the evening. Sometimes those best sunsets aren't the ones you drove an hour for. It's the ones that you catch after dinner when the light suddenly hits the peaks. Okay, phew, that was a lot of great questions. The feedback I got on the podcast was overwhelmingly positive. So I'm glad to hear that you are all enjoying the format, the shorter episodes, and the information. Also, that you're finding it to be so helpful for planning your trip. So thank you for being here and submitting that feedback, even though I kind of bribed you to get it. So let's announce the giveaway winners. So I'm just going to give first names. You'll have to wait to be contacted. But the three winners were Megan, Benjamin, and Mary. So congratulations to all three of you, and I'll be reaching out directly. And to everyone who entered, thank you. Your questions were excellent. Your feedback was incredibly helpful. I heard that you want more Jasper content. I heard that you want more restaurants, coffee shops, and food recommendations. I heard that some of you would love notes or handouts to go along with the podcast episodes because you're stopping and starting the episodes to write things down. So don't forget, you can get emails just about the podcast with some top takeaways. And I'm also working on publishing episode transcripts way faster, so you don't need to take those notes. Okay, this brings me to something new that I'm really excited about. One of the biggest things I've been trying to figure out is how to offer more support to you, my audience, without adding a huge amount of extra one-on-one work, because I love helping people plan their trips. I really do. But I also get an insane amount of emails and messages and Facebook group questions and comments on things that I post. And at some point, I just need a better way to help more people without burning myself out. There's just no possible way I can answer every single email, message, comment. I'm one person. I can't do it. So I've created a new Banff and Jasper planning hub. This is where I'm going to be spending my efforts. This is going to be a place where my travel guide, itineraries, printable itineraries, and support resources all live together in one spot. I'm also adding live Q&A sessions for people who have purchased from me. So if you have bought anything from me, a travel guide, a workshop, itinerary, anything, you get access to my live Q&A sessions, and the next one is on May 5th. You'll be able to submit questions ahead of time. You could join live if you can, if you have the time, and ask more questions live. If you can't make it live, no worries. The replays will be available. Now, this is not meant to replace a full custom consultation that I do. I'm not going to be planning every individual trip in detail live on the call, but it is a way for me to answer common questions, clarify confusing logistics, give extra support to all of you who are using my guides, my itineraries, my workshops. If you have already purchased from me, just watch for that email coming soon with instructions on how to access the new planning hub. You don't need to repurchase what you already own. I'll be sending details by email. Now, there is one little nuance there, and that is if you have only purchased one workshop from me, you will still get access to the live Q&As, but you will not get access to the full Banff and Jasper Planning Hub. If you haven't purchased yet, but this sounds interesting to you, I am launching it with a introductory price. So until May 15th, you can get access for $35.99. So that includes my Banff travel guide, all of my current itineraries, plus any new ones I put together, printable itineraries, access to the Q&A sessions and replays. I've also included in there my Banff planning workshop replay and also my shuttles workshop in there, a replay of that. So that is only until May 15th. After May 15th, the price will go up to $49.99. Again, I'm doing it this way because I want it to be incredibly helpful, but also realistic for me to maintain. Instead of answering the same questions over and over and over in separate emails, I can answer them in one place where everyone benefits. Finally, if you want to talk to me one-on-one, I'm opening more consultation slots through May and June, but I'm going to be taking almost all of July off, and I'll only do them on request in August. So if you want one-on-one help before a summer trip or before a trip in September, now is the time to get booked in. You can find everything at banfftravelplanning.com, and I'll also include the links in the show notes. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Banff Travel Podcast. If this episode helped you, make sure you follow the podcast so you don't miss the next one. And if you know someone who's deep in the planning stage right now, send this episode to them. It might save them searching online for those answers. Until next time, happy trip planning, and I'll see you out on the trails.